This episode, Joe and I are providing a consensus top 10 list. These are guys that we feel their value took quite a substantial hit based on the NFL draft. And honestly, we really don't know what to tell you to do with these players. I mean, their value is so low at this point, or pretty low, that you might just have to hold them. Maybe you trade them. We could maybe talk about that. We'll see. But I'm going to start with the first guy here, Joe. And that's going to be wide receiver Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers. We saw the Green Bay Packers do something that we haven't seen them do in quite a long time. That's actually draft a receiver in the first round. They just had to wait till the draft was in Green Bay, and then they were going to appease all their fans by drafting a receiver. But if you look at Romeo Doubs, right, he's got 1 year left on his contract. His rookie deal that they signed as a 4th round pick. So he'll be a free agent next year. And let's not forget, last year, he was subject to trade rumors. He even got suspended because contract detrimental to the team and feeling like he wasn't getting enough playing time or what have you. So writing's on the wall that really him and the organization are not a good fit. And now that you've got Matthew Golden, who I was alluding to, this receiver that they brought in, they got drafted in the first round. They also draft Savion Williams, a guy who's like a Cordarrelle Patterson type of receiver that comes in there. Now that receiver room is getting a little bit deeper. You already have Jaden Reed, who's probably the guy who we feel is the most safe in that room. So when it comes to Doubs, you got to hope that he goes somewhere else. Maybe he signs somewhere and his value takes a little bit of an uptick. If we had to do a countdown of the top 10, he's probably not our number one guy. Just one of the guys that came to mind first. But Joe, what are your thoughts here on Romeo Doubs?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like the writing is on the wall there, and this is just a really crowded receiver room as well. Like it was already tough for guys to get enough targets and be involved in the offense, and now you got Matthew Golden taking a pick number 23 in the first round, like you mentioned. The Green Bay Packers just simply do not do that. And the fact that they did it, I mean, they've really sent a message to this wide receiver room. Like they weren't happy with the production, drafted a couple of guys in this draft, really bring in the competition, and we'll have to see how it all shakes out. But yeah, if you're a Romeo Doubs owner, I do agree. Like you're going to have to hope that he goes somewhere interesting after this year.
So who is our second player, Joe?
Our second player is going to be wide receiver Jalen McMillan of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. And, obviously, even sooner than Matthew Golden, Emeka Egbuka got taken at pick 19. And for Jalen McMillan, he was a rookie last year who had kind of a slow start, finished strong, but he was picked in the 3rd round in last year's draft. Did have 58 targets, 37 receptions, 461 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Like I said, he came on late last year. But you got the reemergence with Chris Godwin coming back from his injury. Egbuka is, taken, he's a guy that I was really excited about. Honestly, surprised that the Buccaneers went ahead and took him at pick 19. But he's a talented guy. So I really do think, Jalen McMillan is the odd man out of the offense at the moment.
Yeah, I think one of those things that we were surprised about during the draft when we watched the first round, it was one of the biggest shockers, was the draft of Emeka Egbuka in the first round. And, is it Chris Godwin? There could be a consideration that maybe he's not, the Bucs are a little more concerned about that injury and the rehabilitation of that, but they gave him this huge contract to bring him back. So you and I both really don't feel that way. And, even though Mike Evans has a 1-year deal left, if Mike Evans wants to come back to be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer, I would imagine they're going to, let him retire as a Buc. So this has more to do, we believe, of Jalen McMillan. And he did show some flash. We were really excited about what he was able to show towards the end of the year. But Bucs felt like they needed Egbuka, and I think now McMillan takes a back seat, a guy who maybe you drafted in your later rounds, hoping that this was a guy that, you could really build your dynasty team around. I don't think so anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so anymore. And, if you're a McMillan owner, it's really, sad because, with the absence of Chris Godwin, he really did emerge and he was fulfilling that role well. And, heading into before the drafting of Egbuka there, you really thought you had something. And then Egbuka is just, really tanking his value here.
So my next player we're going to be talking about here is wide receiver Quentin Johnston of the LA Chargers. He's had some drop issues, Joe, and they decided the Chargers were going to get a sure-handed receiver in the 2nd round and that was wide receiver Trey Harris. Quentin Johnston was a former first-round pick, but he was not a player that was drafted by Jim Harbaugh in that front office, so they don't have any allegiance toward him. So based on that, with them drafting Omarion Hampton and bringing in Najee Harris, we know they're going to focus on the run. There's only going to be so many targets available. Ladd McConkey is going to garner a ton of them. Now they decide to bring in Trey Harris in the second round. Not only that, they also signed Mike Williams to come back. Maybe that was one that you might have missed, but one-year deal to bring him back with the organization. Obviously, he has familiarity with Justin Herbert in L.A. So I think we both feel that Johnston at this point, or Huge, as many like to call him, at the end of the day, he's just not – we don't think that he's going to really – the potential that he had, he's not really going to get to the point of reaching it. I mean, I believe he finished as wide receiver 36 on the year. So there was some potential with the guy, but ultimately at the end of the day, this pick by them drafting Trey Harris was not a good sign for him.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And, Trey Harris is an exciting player, whether it's the down the field catches that he has, or even, yard after catch that he can do when he gets into space. So I do think, Quentin Johnston was a guy who just had some promise, like you said, just always struggled with the drops, just not coming up with the clutch plays. And he's had a, up and down career thus far. He did rebound and performed a little bit better last year, but I don't know if it was enough, honestly, for him to kind of keep his existing role. And obviously bringing back Mike Williams, who's another big guy, does similar things to Quentin Johnston. It's just there. I think everything you kind of need to know about how the Chargers feel about him.
All right, Joe, who's our fourth guy here?
Yeah, fourth guy here is going to be running back Jonathon Brooks of the Carolina Panthers. Yeah, and I'm sorry if you drafted this guy. Second round pick last year with the Panthers. He was the first running back to be drafted in last year's draft. He was supposed to be the top guy. Honestly, came in with the knee injury, then also, another ACL injury during the season as well. And then, you got the extension of Chuba Hubbard in there. They bring in Rico Dowdle this offseason, and then obviously draft Trevor Etienne in this draft as well. So just things aren't looking good for Jonathon Brooks here. And, I think the Panthers are kind of showing that they, obviously I think regret that pick, and they just don't know. They don't really trust Jonathon Brooks going forward. I'm not sure what they have in him. So they've got all their insurances around him. And honestly, just from a dynasty perspective, things do not look good at the moment.
No, I mean, I think, like you said, I think you got to be really disappointed because after him, he already tore his ACL, rehabilitating, having the second ACL. And, now that running back room looks a lot different. They signed that extension to Chuba Hubbard. They really like Chuba Hubbard. And then they go ahead and draft Trevor Etienne. So, I mean, it was a late round pick, so it's not anything that would necessarily, behoove them to say, like, hey, we're not going to preclude them from allowing Brooks to be a part of their plans. But it's not looking good. You're talking about 2 years of his 4-year rookie deal basically are toast.
Right.
I mean, if any of the guys that we looked at, I mean, this will probably come to no surprise for those who keep trade cut, but I mean, this guy's value absolutely just craters.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, when you don't really play, and it's hard to come back from one ACL injury. Now there's two, and we've even just seen how ACLs have impacted, especially the running backs, and just how they're definitely not the same. Year one coming back, I mean, sometimes it takes a little bit, but some guys just don't really ever come back. So if that's kind of how the Panthers are feeling, getting all these insurances, it can't make you feel too good as a dynasty owner.
The next guy we're going to be talking about here is a guy I had to convince Joe on a little bit here, but I'm going to give you an explanation of why, and that's going to be wide receiver Tank Dell of the Houston Texans. Joe loves it. A lot of people out there, really like his playing style, but he sustained a dislocated knee, a torn ACL, MCL, LCL, and meniscus damage during that game against the Kansas City Chiefs in December, which was really unfortunate for him. Some have questioned, whether, is this even possibly going to be a career ender, for a guy like Tank Dell, who's already kind of a smaller frame. He had that previous injury the year before. So it's like, okay, can this guy really stay durable? Well, the thing that to me is the part that's crushing if you have Tank Dell is, okay, they trade for Christian Kirk, whatever. But going into the draft, they go ahead and draft Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. Say that 3 times fast. And then they draft the other Iowa State receiver in Jalen Noel. And that, to me, is the gut punch, because Jalen Noel is going to play a similar role that Tank Dell would. And so it begs the question, as you know, the team, obviously the medical doctors, they know a lot more. What is the prognosis of Tank Dell and his recovery? And if they felt the need, that they already have Nico Collins, they get an opposite big receiver, in Higgins, right? Now they decide to bring in Noel as a slot guy. I mean, Kirk will be there for this year, but Kirk's on a 1-year deal. So that makes me think that maybe Tank Dell is not going to be the guy that we once knew.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be hard for him to be the guy that we, once knew, just because I think it's just he's got a long way back in terms of the road to recovery, let alone recovering and being able to be an NFL caliber wide receiver. But that was my only caveat. It's not so much, crushed, but we're saying crushed by the NFL draft. That I think he's getting crushed by the injury. But then you're not wrong. The Texans really added insult to injury by bringing in Higgins and Noel in this draft. And Noel was a guy that I thought was really interesting. And like you said, he really is the Tank Dell type of player, going to play in the slot and making those plays.
Yeah, like I said, if it was just Higgins, I wouldn't feel the way I do. But doubling up on receiver like that, when you already have Nico Collins, that makes you think, we got to read between the lines a little bit on that.
Yeah, that's where yeah, he, like you said, he had to convince me. That's where I could see your point of view, and I think it's a decent point you're making.
All right, Joe, who is our 6th player here?
Yeah, our next player is, we're going to go with running back Rhamondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. And, obviously they drafted Travion Henderson in this year's draft, which definitely, crushes whatever value Rhamondre Stevenson had left. I mean, obviously it was a disappointing year that he had last year, had the fumbling issues. Patriots decided to bench him. Then they used Antonio Gibson a lot more. But, it's interesting because, I mean, not too long ago, he's, they did sign him to a 4-year contract, but which they can get out if they want to in 2027. So at least for the next 2 seasons, he will be there. But his starting role, I think will be lost, and it'll be probably Travion Henderson's job. Even though I think with the Henderson thing, though, now just the Patriots, it was always kind of like fade the running back rooms before, and I think we're in a similar fashion, especially with Josh McDaniels coming back. They like to just use certain guys in certain situations, but where they ended up, the draft capital that Travion Henderson had, it's hard to overlook it, and I think he'll get the opportunities first.
Well, I mean, you kind of alluded to the contract. The contract is very deceiving. I mean, right now, he's got 4 years remaining, but let's say hypothetically, let's just say, what, after, June 1st is coming up here, let's just say they're going to cut him. They're done with him, right? Even if they were to cut him, I mean, his dead cap is $6 million. They wouldn't save anything. They'd lose $458,000. But it's not out of the question. They could even cut him next year and actually make some savings. So if they wanted to purely not have any dead cap on the books, they could wait 2 years. But the dead cap we're talking about is so minuscule that if they really wanted to move on from this guy, they totally could. So, and you got to remember, Vrabel was not in the picture when they made this extension. So, I mean, Elliott Wolf was, but Gerard Mayo was the head coach. But that kind of showed it would be a bad move, because after that, he had all those fumbling issues.
Yeah, and if that continues to happen again, I mean, Vrabel is not going to put up with that one bit. I mean, if you're going to be fumbling, you're going to hit the doghouse. You're not going to get the opportunities. So I definitely think, that is interesting. And we'll see, like you said, I mean, if whether or not Vrabel likes Rhamondre or not, but Elliott Wolf might go to battle for him. But you're right. I mean, Patriots had the most amount of cap. I'm sure, if they don't see the value in Stevenson, they'd be fine eating the dead cap and getting rid of him.
Yeah. Next guy we're going to be talking about here is quarterback Deshaun Watson. Hard to believe how far he's fallen as far as, before all the scandal and everything that had happened surrounding him and where he was in Houston, he was one of the premier quarterbacks in the NFL. And, at the time, even though he had, not been playing, a lot of people would thought like, wow, the Browns are going to get their franchise guy, even though they trade all this away. Well, it seems like the writing's on the wall with Watson that he's done with the Browns. And honestly, it could be a career. That's a wrap. Honestly, if you look at it, I mean, he tore his Achilles, which already is not good for him, a guy who's more of a mobile guy. And then he goes ahead and kind of strangely re-ruptures his tendon, supposedly rolling his ankle in Miami or whatever. But, they say it was nothing nefarious or whatever. But so you got Watson on the roster. You go ahead and sign Flacco. Okay, Flacco's a 1-year deal type of thing. Okay. You got Kenny Pickett. You trade for him. He's kind of probably a short-term thing as well. But you go ahead and draft Dylan Gabriel and you draft Shedeur Sanders. But more likely, even if those guys don't pan out, you have a first-round pick next year on top of your own because of the trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars with the Travis Hunter deal. So they are putting themselves in prime position to go ahead and use those 2 first-round picks to trade up and get a quarterback and get the guy that they want. And they're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, more than likely anyways. So as a result, the Watson experience is basically kaput. And then as a result, is there really anybody who's going to be interested in bringing this guy on? I think we both feel that it could be a wrap for Deshaun Watson at this point.
Yeah, I really do. I don't know how many teams are going to give him a chance. I mean, I really think, obviously the Browns really wanted him, massively overpaid. The Texans to go ahead and get Deshaun Watson. It's just been an absolute disaster. And just the fact that, too, like he didn't even take his rehab seriously of his torn Achilles to the point where, he re-injured it to where now he's out a whole nother season. So I just think, with everything that he had going on off the field, now, getting injured, not taking that seriously, getting injured again, I just think teams are going to be like, you know what? He's just an absolute circus, and we do not want that on our team.
Probably one of the worst trades in NFL history. We'll go down to it, if not the worst. But, Russell Wilson of the Broncos was pretty bad too. But honestly, at least I think he was at least better than Deshaun Watson.
I mean, yeah, he was at least playable. And, other than Sean Payton benching him, like he actually played full seasons. Like Deshaun Watson never played more than 6 games in a season with the Browns.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. Next guy we're going to be talking about is another quarterback here, and that's quarterback Will Levis of the Tennessee Titans. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that the Titans drafted quarterback Cam Moore with the number 1 overall pick. Now, what that means for Levis is he's gone back to the backup role, and maybe he gets some Malik Willis treatment and eventually gets traded from the Titans. But for a guy who was almost a borderline first-round pick, a lot of different draft analysts like Mel Kiper Jr. and those were really excited about the potential of Will Levis. At this point, if you had high hopes that he could be something, when is he going to get out of Tennessee? Unless he tries to demand a trade, he's there for what? I mean, he's there for this will be his 3rd season. So, he's got another 2 years to go here. So, when's he going to actually get another opportunity to be a starter? And has he lost that opportunity? So it was looking this way anyways if you had Will Levis. But
right.
This is, at this point, it's a nail in the coffin.
Yeah. Like you said, it was always trending this way, but now it really is like concrete. You just know, they got their guy in Cam Ward, and this is the end of the road for Will Levis. Be interesting to see, they could, release him if they don't want Will Levis to be the backup, and it's a little over $3 million if they wanted to do that. And then
you think just to clear the books?
Maybe. I mean, just to be fair to him and maybe give him a chance. Release him and give him a chance to go to a different team with a different vision. I don't know if it makes sense. Like, I don't think Kalen obviously doesn't like him. He literally had nothing.
You saw it on the sideline. He'd be so animated. Yeah.
So frustrated. I could just see them just cutting bait now. They got their guy. And I think it'd be more valuable for them to have some more more of a veteran presence as a backup than Will Levis. So I could see them just cutting bait with him and possibly giving him an opportunity elsewhere.
All right, Joe. So who's the next guy we're going to be talking about here?
Yeah, our next guy is tight end Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. This is an interesting one because young tight end, had some value. He's definitely showed a lot of promise in the league and been relevant, but Bears taking Colson Loveland in the first round. It seems that Ben Johnson would prefer Colson Loveland. Loveland also provides some extra athleticism there in the receiving ability. Cole Kmet's more of a complete tight end, but Loveland is really, a weapon that Johnson can use in this passing game. Definitely will be interested to see how they utilize him. But Cole Kmet also from a, dynasty standpoint, this is probably his last year in Chicago. They can move on from him next year, only incur $3.2 million dead cap, unless they would want to have the two tight ends. But, if that does happen, we'll see, it'll be interesting to see where Kmet could land if they do, in fact, release him next year.
Yeah, and honestly, if it comes to 12 personnel, the guy who's going to be the receiving entity is going to be Colson Loveland. So that's a knock against them. And honestly, the Luther Burden selection didn't help them either, because now they can be in 3 receiver set, and more than likely it's going to be Loveland at the tight end, not Kmet. So his snap share is going to take a huge dip. So as a result, you really have to hope that he leaves in free agency and maybe he finds a team that would be interested in him. It's not like there are a lot of elite tight end rooms. So maybe that could be his opportunity to have an upswing, but it's not good for Kmet's outlook at this point.
No, I still think he could be okay this year. It's just really past this year, just because it does take a little bit for tight ends, rookie tight ends to be acclimated. There's only been a few that have just absolutely burst onto the scene as a rookie. Loveland's also a younger guy. He's, also kind of raw, so I think he's going to have to develop. So I think having a guy like Cole Kmet there for him to learn under for at least the first year, maybe Cole Kmet's snap share and, utilization doesn't get completely hurt this first year here.
All right, so last guy we're going to be talking about here is wide receiver Ja'Lynn Polk of the New England Patriots, a guy that we haven't really talked a lot about here in our episodes, but we both feel that he took quite a substantial hit with them taking Kyle Williams in the 3rd round out of Washington State. Not only that, they did sign Stephon Diggs to a pretty lengthy, expensive contract, so they're trying to bring a lot of talent in to support Drake May. Polk was a former 2nd-round pick. Out of Washington. So there's a lot of hope with this guy, but the big knock against him was that he wasn't able to separate, and he really didn't show it in the NFL. So although the general manager and Elliott Wolf, was there, new head coach and Mike Vrabel. So basically, everyone has to compete at this point. But that wide receiver room is now looking pretty deep. You got those 2 guys we talked about, which I think both, Diggs will be coming back from the injury, but Kyle Williams, you saw how he was able to separate. So I could think already I see him kind of going ahead of Polk. But you got guys like Javon Baker, Kayshon Boutte, Kendrick Bourne. There are a lot of different options now there, and he has to fight in that training camp battle. For a guy who's a 2nd-round pick, and possibly he was taken pretty high in your dynasty drafts, this could be a whiff and a miss here.
Yeah, it definitely could be. And I think, honestly, I think the Patriots were disappointed with Ja'Lynn Polk. I think a lot of it had to do with his lack of ability to separate. I know, just watching some Patriot games and just listening, the frustration that they had with him, and, Drake May just having to hold on to the ball, trying to, find an open guy. Honestly, Pop Douglas was one of his go-to targets because he was a guy who could
forgot about him.
Yeah. So, this is just an absolutely crowded room. And if he still, hasn't found the ability to create some separation, they've got plenty of other guys that can, and he'll fall out of favor there pretty fast.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if he gets traded or cut. I don't want to be, bombastic with what I'm saying here, but it's like you said, I forgot even about Pop Douglas too. It's like you're only going to probably keep 4 or 5 guys, and then you've got special teams players. So, and I don't know what Polk's ability is on special teams. I don't know, his ability there. So, they can only they only keep so many guys, and Vrabel doesn't have any allegiance to him. He's just going to say, who do I think are the best players at this point?
Yeah, right. And that's the other scary part for Ja'Lynn Polk is, it was really even though GM's the same, as far as, coaching staffs get together, even McDaniel's coming back at offensive coordinator wasn't a part of that draft process last year. So if Vrabel and Mike Daniel don't like Ja'Lynn Polk and they like some of these other guys, then, I think he will be on the trade blocker process. I don't know if he'd be cut just because he was a second round pick. I think that would provide him some value to at least get traded.
Yeah, maybe at least maybe like a late round pick or something like that. You get the Jonathan Mingo or effect, basically.
Yeah, right.